Søren Kierkegaard was philosophical father to the existential movement. He is not very well known and constantly quoted like Friedrich Nietzsche, because he was much more demanding for his male audience. He asked him to do something very counterintuitive and make a leap of faith instead of relying in that natural violent force that makes us dominate the nature. His life was full of sorrow that he quite frankly enhanced with his chronic depression, and he enjoyed it in some perverse, bizarre, spiritual style. He was quite open and easily approachable man to all walks of life, despite being a rigid intellectual from upper class. Unfortunately, the print media helped him to isolate himself by painting him as a loose and snooty person. He had a chance of happiness and was engaged. Of course, he had to let go of this happiness and use this experience as his fodder to expand his spiritual sense. But I think many academics are grossly leaving out the medical doctor reassuring assessment to his doubt. According to his diary, he suffered from something abnormal in his sexual life that was diagnosed by his physician. Print media made a lot of gross characters of Kierkegaard, but I think there's a small seed of truth from there. If I compare the assessment of the doctor to his depression and various health ailments later in life, that he had Cryptorchidism, that is common birth defect with boys. That means that one or both testicles have not descended to the scrotum, leaving the testicle inside the body to be damaged by the heat of the body. His parents were quite old when they had him, which increases his chance of a birth defect. So this means that he was suffering from lack of testosterone through his lifetime. Make what you want from this, but his physician also exempted him from the military service. I have read his pseudo-autobiographical Diary of the Seducer, and there is no doubt that Kierkegaard was heterosexual. In the book, he makes fictional account of a protagonist seducing a young girl for his aesthetic pleasure and planning the whole love affair from the start to the end, like all-knowing and powerful being. It is almost annoying as Sherlock Holmes novel, where everything is set in motion with even the slightest detail. This is, of course, was not true in the case of Kierkegaard, but an afterthought for all the experience he had with his love life up to this point. He does not violate women physically, but in a spiritual sense. He knows that even though in life it might seem that a man is the pursuer of women, the active opponent, in the end, man turns himself inside to a woman, and it is a woman who dominates the man, very much like fertilized embryo turns the spermicide into a totally different creature. This is why he only pursues young women, because they are canvas that have not been spoiled with crude constructs of the human society. They are mysterious like oceans that tickle the imagination of a wandering adventurer. This is why romantic love can't last. It domesticates the opposing factions instead of moving them to the vast spiritual world. Love blooms in a very short period, and he wants to make this one his masterpiece, a perfectly blooming flower from every sense. There's a good line in the book where the protagonist writes down that if he had a real friend, this friend would tell him not to go forward with this plan. But there is none. This is how Kierkegaard saw himself, a lone drifter who can fly next to the sources of light, but can never sit down to relax anywhere. It is a hard book to read, and I can understand why the previous owner left his bookmarks right in the first sections of it. It sounds like a propaganda to admire this lonely quest that leads to nowhere in the starting paragraphs. The book itself is short, but every phrase demands attention and movement away from the sexual desires that a normal person would feel. I think because Kierkegaard's body was not actually working as a normal biological body, he could transcend this erotic sense so well. What a poor creature he was. But isn't every artist a poor creature like him? Someone who cannot fulfill themselves, but in their exploration and despair they give us great art.